2.1 is the approximate number of children each woman should have for a population to remain stable. 1 to replace herself, 1 to replace her husband, and 0.1 as a buffer for children not lucky enough to grow up to become adults. This buffer used to be much higher in the past. It used to be quite common for children not to survive their infancy. And yet, somehow we've always managed to replace ourselves, or even grow in numbers. That's no longer the case anywhere in the Western world. I was curious about the reason, so I asked my friends and colleagues. They offered 3 general explanations, and what fascinated me is that actually none of them were true. I'll start by letting you know why I think that is, and then offer an alternative. Explanation number 1. The contraceptive pill. Invented in the 60s, it gave women more control over family planning. A contributing factor, sure, but the birth rates in the West have been falling well before the 60s, and this also doesn't explain why some societies still manage to keep growing despite having access to the same technology. Explanation number 2. Poor living conditions. Young people have to work too long and earn too little. Apartments are too small. That one doesn't seem true either. Our societies are richer than at any point in our history. Also, many European governments offer child benefits without any impact on the birth rates. Finally, overpopulation. Now, this one does seem to be closer to the truth, but I wouldn't say it's the main cause. Societies which declare that having children is irresponsible in our overcrowded world often also declare that mass immigration is necessary due to low birth rates. And it also doesn't explain why different cultures have different birth rates in the same geographic area. Now, what else is changing in our modern world, besides technological advances, living conditions, and overpopulation? We're also getting less religious. And if you look at the statistics, they do show a strong correlation. And what surprised me was to find out that this is not a new phenomenon at all. If you read reports of one medieval heresy, the Cathars, you find texts like these. Why then do you daily censure the carnal union of man and woman, calling it the work of the devil? Why do you not produce sons and daughters for your Lord God? Why do you take wives but refuse to beget offspring whence stems the human race? A report of a slightly later heresy, Brethren of the Free Spirit, says, Now if it so happens that a woman there has been gotten with child, as soon as the offspring is delivered, it is brought back to the same place. A great fire is lit, and the child is thrown from hand to hand through the flames by those sitting around the fire, until it is dead. It is then reduced to ashes. From the ashes bread is made, of which a morsel is given to each as a sacrament. Once that has been eaten, it is very rarely that one is brought back to his senses from that heresy. An article from the 19th century when atheism in Europe started to become a global phenomenon, states, France is the best instance of a pathological birth rate. The term natalité pathologique is used by Dr. Jacques Bertillon, the head of the Statistical Bureau of the city of Paris. France has rather a larger number of wives aged 1545 than England and Wales, but its corrected legitimate birth rate is 29% lower. We must look for an increasing practice of the artificial prevention of childbearing. France has anticipated the rest of the world, but it is only a question of decades, in the absence of a great change, before others follow in the same direction. A Soviet article from the 1920s says, The birth statistics of the last decade show a rapid decrease in the average size of families. The family with 1 or 2 children is beginning to predominate. In Tsarist Russia, limitation of the size of the family was a privilege of the bourgeoisie and of a part of the lower middle class. The number of abortions carried out in Kiev nearly doubles from year to year. It seems impossible to provide the necessary number of beds. Therefore, since 1925, we have opened, apart from the free beds, a limited number of additional beds, for which a moderate fee, 8 rubles for the operation and the stay in hospital, is asked. There seems to be a correlation, then, between lack of religiosity and low birth rates. But why is that? Other reports from those times shed some light. The general beliefs of all Cathars are as follows: that the devil made this world and everything in it. A belief common to all Cathars is that carnal matrimony has always been a mortal sin, and that in the future life one incurs no heavier a penalty for adultery or incest than for legitimate marriage. Also, they believe that to eat meat, eggs, or cheese, even in pressing need, is a mortal sin. This for the reason that they are begotten by coition. A Catholic council decreed in 1211 that a woman conceives in her belly by the cooperation of Satan, that Satan has resided there, and withdraws only at the birth of the child. If a brother and sister, living together in freedom of spirit, have together brought a child into the world, they have every right to put it to death, or throw it into the water, as if it were a little worm, and they need have no scruple about it, nor confess to a priest, for they have merely returned it to its original element. They have every right to declare what they have done, by reason of their perfect freedom of spirit. The article from the 19th century mentioned earlier further elaborates. The examples indicate that the gospel of comfort has been widely adopted, and that it is becoming the ethical standard of civilized communities. It is only a question of decades, in the absence of a great change in the moral standpoint of the majority of the people, before others follow in the same direction. Finally, Alexander Solzhenitsyn writes about the Soviet Union. The permanent lie becomes the only safe form of existence. Every wag of the tongue can be overheard, every facial expression observed. But that was not all. Your children were growing up. If they weren't yet old enough, you and your wife had to avoid saying openly in front of them what you really thought. After all, they were being brought up to be Pavlik Morozovs, to betray their own parents, and they wouldn't hesitate to repeat his achievement. And if the children were still little, then you had to decide what was the best way to bring them up, whether to start them off on lies instead of the truth, or to tell them the truth with the risk that they might make a slip. The choice was really such that you would rather not have any children. What is it in religion that seemingly makes people more willing to have children? Is it the promise of hope, the call on responsibility, a sense of belonging to a greater collective, over comfort and individuality? Has a world, absent religion, had grown slightly colder? What do you think?